It was one of those evenings that felt perfectly normal at first. Soft jazz played in the background, the smell of roasted chicken filled the air, and my father couldn't stop smiling. It had been months since I last saw my parents, and this dinner was supposed to be our fresh start. We talked about small things, work, the weather, old memories. For a while, everything felt almost peaceful. Then my dad leaned forward, cutting a piece of chicken, and said, "So, did the money help?" My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. The room suddenly felt smaller, quieter. "What money?" I asked, trying to sound calm even though my heart was racing. My mother's hand shook as she reached for her glass. She didn't look at me. Not once. My dad smiled, but it looked forced now. "The money we sent," he said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. My mom's napkin slipped from her lap, and she bent down to pick it up, avoiding my eyes completely. The hum of jazz suddenly sounded too loud, like it was trying to fill the silence between us. My throat went dry. I could feel something heavy in the air, something unspoken that neither of them wanted to say. That's when I noticed my mom's small shake of the head, almost a warning. "Don't ask." But it was too late. I already knew this wasn't just dinner. Something was deeply, painfully wrong. 2 years earlier, my whole life had fallen apart like a house made of paper. It started with my job. One morning, my boss called me into his office and told me they were restructuring. That was the word he used, but it really meant I was out. Just like that, everything I'd built came undone. The rent was due, and without a paycheck, I had to pack up my apartment within weeks. My fiancé, who once promised to stand by me through anything, suddenly became distant. Arguments turned into silence, and one night, he simply said he couldn't do it anymore. By the end of that month, I had lost everything, my job, my home, and the person I thought would be my forever. I remember calling my parents, voice shaking, trying to hold back tears. I told them what had happened and asked if they could help, even a little. My dad said things were tight and that they couldn't spare much. My mom stayed quiet the whole call, only whispering, "It'll get better." I hung up feeling smaller than ever. I sold my car just to survive. With the little money I got, I moved into a tiny shared flat in Mombasa. The room was barely big enough for a bed and a desk, but it was all I could afford. Nights were the hardest. I'd stare at the ceiling, thinking about how quickly life could fall apart, how people you trust can turn away when you need them most. But somehow, I refused to give up. I started taking small freelance jobs, writing reports, managing accounts, anything that paid. I worked late into the night, sometimes surviving on nothing but tea and bread. Slowly, I began to rebuild myself. Brick by brick, piece by piece, I started to feel alive again. No one sent me help, not a single coin, not even a message asking how I was doing. I learned to be my own rescue. So now, sitting at that dinner table, hearing my dad casually mention the money, my stomach dropped. What money was he talking about? I had begged them for help back then. I had cried on the phone, swallowed my pride, and still, they said no. Every struggle, every sleepless night, every empty plate, I had faced it alone. I felt a strange mix of anger and confusion flooding through me. Was he lying? Or had something happened that I didn't know about? I glanced at my mom. She looked like she wanted to disappear, her eyes darting anywhere but mine. My heart started pounding. Suddenly, all the memories of those painful days came rushing back, the loneliness, the hunger, the cold walls of that tiny room. And now, after all that, my father was talking about money they supposedly sent me. A chill ran down my spine. Maybe the past I thought I knew wasn't the whole story after all. The moment the words left my mouth, "What money, Dad?" everything changed. The room, once warm and filled with the smell of roasted chicken, suddenly felt cold and heavy. My dad froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. My mother's hand jerked slightly, the wine in her glass trembling like it was alive. For a second, no one said anything. The only sound was the faint hum of the jazz music playing in the background, now feeling too soft, too distant, like it belonged to another world. My dad finally cleared his throat and said, "The money we sent to help you. The one your mom insisted we give." His voice was calm, but there was something practiced about it, too smooth, too rehearsed. My mom's eyes shot toward him, wide and nervous. She pressed her lips together so tightly I thought she might draw blood. I could see her knuckles turning white as she gripped her glass, trying to steady her shaking hands. A strange silence filled the space between us. My heartbeat was so loud I could almost hear it echoing inside my head. I stared at them both, waiting for one of them to explain, to make sense of what he'd just said. But neither did. My dad went back to cutting his food, pretending everything was normal. My mom looked down, her shoulders tense, her eyes flickering toward me and then quickly away again. Something was wrong. I could feel it in my bones. My mom wasn't just uncomfortable, she was scared. Her breathing had quickened, her hands wouldn't stop trembling, and then I saw it, a small, almost invisible shake of her head. It was quick, barely a second long, but I caught it. A warning. Don't ask. Don't push. My chest tightened. What was she trying to protect me from? I leaned back in my chair, my appetite gone. The air felt thick, almost hard to breathe. My dad kept talking about other things, work, neighbors, random small talk, but I couldn't focus on a single word. Every time I looked at my mother, she avoided my eyes, staring at the table like it held some terrible secret. I noticed the way her fingers picked at the edge of her napkin, the way her jaw clenched every time my dad spoke. I wanted to ask again, louder this time, to demand an answer, but that small shake of her head stopped me. The fear in her eyes wasn't something I could ignore. I could tell this wasn't just about money. It was something deeper, darker, something that had been buried for years. My hands felt cold, and my mind started to race. What money had they sent? Where did it go? Why was my mother acting like the truth could destroy us? That dinner, which was supposed to bring us closer, now felt like a trap. I sat there, pretending to smile, nodding at whatever my dad said, but inside, I knew this was just the beginning of something I wasn't ready to uncover. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I tossed and turned, my father's words echoing in my head, "The money we sent to help you." It didn't make sense. If they had really sent me money, where did it go? I remembered every painful day of that time, counting coins for food, crying quietly in that tiny Mombasa room, wondering why no one cared. If they had helped, I would have known. I would have felt it. The thought wouldn't leave me alone. So, at 2 in the morning, I got out of bed, turned on my laptop, and opened my old bank account, the one I hadn't touched in years. The login page felt like a doorway to the past. My hands trembled as I typed in my password. The screen loaded slowly, almost teasing me. Then it appeared, my old account balance, dusty with inactivity. I scrolled through the transactions, heart pounding faster with each line, until I saw it. A $15,000 deposit labeled Family Fund. The date stopped me cold. It was made right around the time I had lost everything, when I was crying to my parents for help, when they said they had nothing to give. I stared at the number, my mouth dry. They had sent money. They had tried to help. For a split second, I felt a strange mix of relief and guilt. Maybe I had judged them too harshly. But then I looked closer, scrolling down to the next entry. 2 days later, there it was, another transaction. A withdrawal. The exact same amount. $15,000. My eyes narrowed. That couldn't be right. I hadn't touched that account in years. My heartbeat quickened as I clicked on the details. The withdrawal wasn't mine. The authorization name listed underneath wasn't mine either. It was my mother's. Her name. Her signature. My stomach dropped so fast I thought I might be sick. My mother, who had sat across from me at dinner, shaking, avoiding my eyes, had taken the money. The money my father thought I received. The money that could have saved me from sleeping hungry, from losing everything. My hands went cold. I zoomed in on the digital signature again, just to be sure. It was hers. There was no mistake. A lump formed in my throat as memories from that night flashed in my mind, her warning look, that tiny shake of her head, the fear in her eyes. It all made sense now. She wasn't afraid of me finding out about the money. She was afraid of what would happen when I learned the truth. I sat there staring at the screen, my mind numb. The glow from the laptop cast pale light across my room, and tears began to blur my vision. $15,000, money that could have changed everything, had been taken by the one person I trusted most. My mother. And as the truth sank in, I realized that the lie between us had been much bigger than I ever imagined. The sun had barely risen when I found myself standing outside my parents' house. The air was cool, still carrying the silence of dawn. I hadn't slept all night. My mind kept replaying the bank statements, my mother's trembling hands, that fearful look in her eyes. I needed answers, and I needed them from her. The gate creaked as I pushed it open. In the garden, my mom was already outside, watering her plants. She looked peaceful, like nothing was wrong, like the truth wasn't tearing me apart inside. For a moment, I almost turned back. But then I remembered the $15,000, the help I was supposed to get, and how it vanished the moment it arrived. She didn't notice me right away. I stood there watching her, her back slightly bent, her hair tied neatly, moving with that same quiet rhythm she always had. When I finally spoke, my voice was soft but steady. "Why did you take it?" I asked. The watering can slipped slightly in her hand. Water splashed onto her shoes, but she didn't move. For a long second, she just stood there frozen. Then she slowly turned around. Her eyes met mine, and I saw guilt, fear, and something else, sadness so deep it almost looked like pain. "I didn't take it for me," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I took it to save your father's company. He didn't want you to know." The words hung in the air between us like smoke. I stared at her, unable to speak. My heart felt heavy, not because of the money, but because of what it meant. They had lied to me. They had watched me struggle, starve, and break down, while pretending they couldn't help. All that time, they were protecting him. Why? I finally managed to ask, my voice shaking. "You watched me lose everything. You saw me begging for help. Why didn't you just tell me the truth?" Her eyes filled with tears, and she looked away. "Because your father's company was drowning," she said softly. "We thought it would only be temporary. He promised he'd pay it back." She tried to smile, but it came out as a broken, trembling expression. "I didn't know it would cost us this much." I felt tears burning behind my eyes. The woman I had always trusted, the one who had taught me about honesty and kindness, had betrayed me, not for herself, but for him. For his pride. My voice came out in a whisper. "You let me suffer." She didn't deny it. She just stood there, shaking, holding the watering can like it could somehow protect her from the truth. The morning sun started to rise higher, painting everything in gold, but I couldn't feel its warmth. My mother's eyes begged for forgiveness, but I couldn't find any words left to give. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about the lie. The one they had both chosen to live in, while I was left to fight for my life alone. And as I turned to leave, I realized something had broken between us that no apology could ever fix. I walked back into the house, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. My father was sitting in the living room, calm as ever, a cup of coffee in his hand like nothing had happened. The morning light spilled through the window, landing softly on his face, making him look peaceful, almost proud. It made me sick. I stood in the doorway, staring at him, waiting for the guilt to show, waiting for something human to appear in his eyes. But when he finally looked up, he just smiled faintly, like I was overreacting. "Dad," I said, my voice trembling, "you knew about the money." It wasn't a question. He didn't flinch. He just took another slow sip of his coffee before setting the cup down. "Of course I did," he said calmly, as if we were talking about the weather. "It was my company, my responsibility. I had no choice." My stomach turned. "No choice?" I repeated, stepping closer. "You watched me fall apart. You saw me begging for help. You lied to me, both of you." My voice cracked, but he didn't even raise his. He looked straight at me and said, "You're young. You would recover." I couldn't let my name fall apart. That one sentence hit harder than anything else ever could. My name. That's what he cared about, not me, not his family, not the nights I spent crying in a dark room wondering if I'd ever stand again. It was his name, his pride, his image. I stared at him, trying to understand how a father could say something like that and still look so calm. I could feel my hands shaking, my throat tightening. "So your reputation was worth more than your daughter?" I asked quietly. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence said it all. He just leaned back in his chair, exhaled slowly, and looked away, like this was a conversation he was tired of having. My mom was still outside in the garden, probably crying, and here he was, acting like none of it mattered. The weight of all those years hit me at once, the birthdays he missed, the advice he gave about being strong, the way he always seemed more worried about what people thought than how I felt. Suddenly, it all made sense. He had always cared about appearances. He had always been that man. I just hadn't wanted to see it. I stood there, shaking, my chest tight with anger and heartbreak. The man I once saw as my protector now felt like a stranger. The silence between us grew thick, almost suffocating. He picked up his cup again, avoiding my eyes, as if the conversation was over. But for me, everything had just ended. The love, the trust, the respect, it all burned away in that quiet moment. And as I turned to leave, I realized something inside me had shattered for good. The father I thought I knew no longer existed. Months passed after that morning, but the wound never really healed. I had stopped visiting my parents, stopped calling, stopped pretending that things were okay. Every time I thought about my father's calm face and his words, I couldn't let my name fall apart, something inside me burned. But I also knew that anger wouldn't fix anything. So I threw myself into my work. I took every small job that came my way, learning everything I could about finance and investments. I spent long nights studying, improving, rebuilding the life they thought I couldn't handle. Slowly, I started to rise again. Then one afternoon, as I sat in a cafe in Mombasa finishing a report, I got a call that changed everything. The voice on the other end introduced himself from Twala Investments, a major firm I had heard of before. My heart skipped a beat when I realized they were the same company that had taken over my father's debts when his business nearly collapsed. The man on the phone said they were looking for a financial consultant. "We've seen your work," he told me. "You're sharp, independent, and exactly what we need." For a moment, I just sat there in silence, stunned. Then I smiled. "I'm interested," I said. From the first day I joined Twala, I kept my history a secret. No one there knew I was the daughter of the man whose company had gone under because of them. I didn't mention it, and they never asked. I focused on my work, and soon enough, my report started getting noticed. I was promoted, then trusted with bigger projects. The team respected me, and the board began to see me as someone who got things done quietly but effectively. I was no longer the broken girl my father once pitied, I had become someone powerful in my own right. Then one day, the CEO called me into his office. He smiled and said, "We're planning to buy out the remaining shares of a company that still owes us some assets. We want you to lead the acquisition." When he slid the file across the desk, my heart nearly stopped. The company name at the top read, Kavari Holdings, my father's company. I stared at it for a few seconds, trying not to show the storm of emotions rising inside me. I nodded slowly and said, "I'll handle it." In the following weeks, I worked quietly, handling every document, every negotiation, every detail of the buyout. My father had no idea who was behind it. To him, it was just another business transaction. But to me, it was something more. It wasn't revenge. I didn't sabotage him or twist the knife. I simply let life come full circle. When the deal was done, I didn't feel joy or pride, just peace. I hadn't destroyed him, I'd only let the truth balance itself out. The same way he once chose his name over me, I chose my future over him. A year later, we sat at the same dinner table again. The same soft jazz played, the same roasted chicken filled the air, but everything felt different. The silence between us wasn't awkward anymore, it was heavy, like everyone knew this meal wasn't about food. My father looked older, tired. His confidence had faded. He cleared his throat and asked quietly, "So, how's work treating you these days?" His tone wasn't casual, it was careful, like he already knew something was coming. I smiled politely and reached into my bag. "Work's been great," I said, sliding a folder across the table. Twala Investments just closed their biggest acquisition yet. My father frowned slightly, curious. He opened the folder and began to read. For a moment, he didn't understand. Then I watched the color drain from his face. On the first page was his company's logo, Kavari Holdings, and below it, my signature. His hands began to shake as he flipped through the papers. My mother leaned closer, her eyes wide. You bought your father's company?" she whispered, her voice breaking. I looked at her gently and nodded. "Yes," I said softly. "I guess the money finally helped." The words hung in the air. My father didn't say anything. He just sat there, staring at the contract like it had stolen his breath. My mother covered her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. I felt no anger, no pride, just a quiet sense of closure. The same table where I once felt small and powerless was now where everything had come full circle. I stood up, smoothed my dress, and said, "Dinner was lovely." Then I walked away, leaving the silence, and the truth, behind me.